Welcome to a discussion of Chapter 4, or Book 4 if you prefer, of the Iliad. And today we're going to be talking about the truce shattered. So the momentary truce between the Greeks and the Trojans is shattered. How is it shattered? What happens? Why is it shattered? But first, make sure you check out my new translation of the Iliad. This is for you, particularly if this is your first time reading the Iliad. This is in verse, but it's really easy to read, and I have removed all of the challenging barriers that are often in even very good translations of the Iliad, which makes it really difficult for a modern reader to understand it. You can go to troubadour.studio/Iliad, get a free chapter 1. This is now available in EPUB or Kindle or whatever you want to read on a digital format, or you could buy a print version. You could buy one if you're in the US or UK or internationally, anywhere in the world. So get this copy, check it out from my personal website, which helps so that I can do the Odyssey and then Greek plays and then Virgil. So I want to do more of these first-timer reads that will really help you enjoy the Iliad. If you're just joining us for this video, I want to give you a quick recap of the first 3 chapters that we covered in broad strokes. So we have the greatest Greek warrior, Achilles, and Agamemnon had a quarrel. Achilles quits the fight. After 10 years, he is no longer going to be fighting for the Greeks. Then we have the Greeks and Trojans preparing to battle each other. We have a duel between Menelaus and Paris. Paris stole or abducted Helen, the wife of Menelaus, and that's why they're dueling, and that's why they're at the war. And now they're finally going to duel, but Paris, before he could be killed by Menelaus, who's obviously winning this fight, is whisked away by Aphrodite, his patroness. Paris is going to sleep with Helen, and that's it. And so instead of fighting, he's going to love, because he's a lover, not a fighter. So that's where we left off at the end of chapter 3. What's happening now is you have these 2 armies that were sitting around watching a duel, prepared for fighting, and now what's going to happen? Well, this chapter is called Truce Shattered. So something happens to their momentary truce. Now in my section, I have a chapter description at the beginning in very easy to read prose to help you understand this whole chapter. And then I have sections throughout the chapter that will help you, guide you through understanding the verse and getting more out of the reading. So there are 6 sections in chapter 4 in my version. The gods debate, Athena's deception, Menelaus wounded, Agamemnon's rally, the clash of armies, and heroes fall. So we're going to go section by section, kind of discuss it, and I will give you a little bit of some snippets of reading it. We won't read the whole thing, but just some snippets to give you an idea. Again, I hope you'll follow along by going to troubadour.studio/Iliad, supporting the channel by getting your own version that you will be able to read and really be able to wow all your friends that you read the Iliad, because this is the Iliad. So let's get started with the gods debate. Here we have a debate between Zeus, Hera, and a little bit of Athena, but mostly it's between Zeus and Hera. Now, Zeus has promised to back Achilles' claim that he is so important, the Greeks are going to fail without him. So that means Zeus is now on the side of the Trojans. But Hera, her favorite cities are all Greek cities. And same thing with Athena. She is a fan of the Greeks. So they want that side to win. What Hera tells to Zeus is that it is improper for him to allow Troy to live in peace. That they as the gods need to do something to enact the war again that will eventually lead to the destruction of Troy itself. So here's a quick passage from Zeus to Hera that I wanted you to hear. Hera, why do you hold such hatred still for Priam and his sons? What harm to you have they done that you're so set on their doom? Would you devour Troy and all its men to quench your wrath? But do as you desire. I'll not allow this fight between us both to grow and fester into something worse. But hear me well, and think upon my words. When I choose to destroy a city dear to you, where men you love reside and thrive, you must not try to stop or slow my wrath, for I have yielded once to your desire, though in my heart I did not want to give. Now, this is kind of clever because Zeus is actually supposed to be helping the destruction of Troy, but he's now kind of trying to get some goodies for himself, right, in this negotiation with Hera. So now Hera is going to go on and say, we need to get this started. Okay, I understand what you're saying, but I'll do whatever it takes to get this because this is what I want right now. So what do they decide? This is section 2, Athena's deception. So Athena, the goddess of wisdom and warfare as well, comes down to the Trojan battlefield. She finds a man named Pandaros. Pandaros is a Trojan archer. And what she does is she whispers in his ear that he will win great glory if he shoots an arrow. Not being ordered to, he just takes it on his own initiative to shoot this arrow into the Greek forces and kill the great Menelaus. I wanted to read something not about one of the speeches, but about one of the descriptions and talk a little bit about what is so beautiful and why I chose to do a real translation of the verse rather than a retelling. So there are many great retellings, reimaginings of the Trojan War that you can pick up today. There's one that we used to teach at the school I taught at in California called Black Ships Over Troy. And this is a fun, child-like story that relays a lot of the important information, but it's all made up by a modern author. There's a lot that's missing in the verse, in the details, in the characterization that we get in this version. That's a real translation that anybody can pick up. Anybody who reads English can pick up. And let me just give you one of these examples. So Pandaros hears this whisper of this god that he can't see. She's just kind of whispering in his ear. This is the passage. He took his bow of polished sturdy horn made from a wild goat he once had shot, striking its chest as it leapt from a rock. The horns had grown to 16 palm length long. A skilled bower had worked and polished them, and set a golden tip upon the end. Pandaros bent his bow, pulling it tight, and set himself behind his shielded men, so none could see him fire upon the Greeks. He drew an arrow from his quiver's pouch, a deadly shaft that carried pain and death. He laid it on the string and prayed aloud to mighty Apollo, master of the bow, promising 100 lambs upon his shrine when he returned to Zelea once again. He pulled the string and held it to his chest, drawing it tight, and brought the arrow back. He bent his great bow until it creaked with strain. The strings sang loud. The arrow leapt away and flew with deadly speed into the crowd, seeking its mark with all the force it bore. So that long section is simply Homer saying Pandaros shot the bow. And that's how I think it would often be told today, is it would be just a simple action. Maybe there would be some brief description of the bow. Maybe there'd be something very brief about the moment. But notice the pause and the emphasis. Now, none of this is arbitrary on Homer's part. So I'm going to point out a couple things here that you'll see thematically drawn out in so much of the words being chosen by Homer, the great poet. He took his bow of polished, sturdy horn, and now there's going to be a description of the goat that was killed to make this bow that's going to shoot, and that is a bow that is a deadly bow. So when you kill an animal, so there's a stress, right, of the killing of an animal, killing of a living creature, in order to bring more death. So this book is sometimes called the Book of Death, and it is, but it also, notice it talks about the relationship between life and death, the relationship of the use of one thing transforming into something else. And there's great detail brought into this. Striking its chest, so that it even shows you an image. Today, I think this would just be like an ox bow or a goat bow or something like that was used and strung heavily, a 50-pound bow or 100-pound bow, brought back and twanged into the audience and brought into the Greek army great pain and destruction. Just a quick little snippet. That's how a modern writer would do it. A little bit better than that, of course. But again, Homer really emphasizes the horns had grown to 16 palm length. So it had grown a long life. A skilled bower, so a man who dedicated his life to creating bows and arrows, had worked at it and polished it. He set a golden tip at the end, so it's ornamented. And then the shaft, the arrow, is not just a shaft, it's a shaft that carries pain and death. So there's a kind of relationship between the death that was used to kill the goat, that was then used by a bower to craft it into something beautiful but deadly. And then Pandaros hides behind the Greek shields, shoots the shaft, and there's a singing notion, which we've heard that twang that you do sometimes hear if you've ever shot a bow and arrow, which I have, and it can make that sound, and flew with deadly speed into the crowd, seeking its mark and all the force. So it's like it starts with the death of this goat, and it's going to go transform, or it's like a conveyor belt of death that's going to bring death to some Greek soldier. Now, in this case, we find out that it doesn't bring death, it just brings pain. And we'll talk about that in a second. But generally, these bows and arrows, of course, are bringers of death. So that whole relationship between the transformation of all the aspects of life and then how it brings into this moment that's going to end the life of a man is throughout so many stories of this in the Iliad. And you see this everywhere, and it's part of the lusciousness of the story, and it all means something. Homer's trying to say something about this relationship that we'll get into even more as we go through it. The next section is Menelaus wounded. Now here's the section that I wanted to focus on here. It's actually a speech by Agamemnon, Menelaus' brother, and what he says when he sees that Menelaus has been shot with an arrow. Now, it's clear that there's blood dripping down, that it could be a fatal wound, but we don't know for sure. We will find out from Menelaus that it's not a fatal wound. It's basically a flesh wound. But nevertheless, at first, Agamemnon thinks that it's fatal. And his reaction when he thinks his brother is going to die is really, really, really important. And so we want to x-ray this and think about it. And this is where I'm going to pull out the word of the day from, is from this little snippet. I'm not going to read the whole Agamemnon speech. Go to troubadour.studio/Iliad to buy the whole thing, but I'll read some of it and give you a sense of what's going on here. His brother gets shot. Menelaus gets shot. Agamemnon is distraught at this, and he, says they've broken the truce. We're going to war, things like that. But then what he says to his brother is what I want to focus on here. So here's the passage. But now, my brother, if you die today, if your life ends, it brings me endless grief. For how shall I return to thirsty Argos and face the shame of losing you this way? The Greeks would sail for home in bitter shame, and we would leave great Helen and her wealth as prizes for the Trojans. Your bones would lie forever here in Troy's unending war, and some proud Trojan leaping on your tomb would boast and say, "See here, great Menelaus, Agamemnon could not save his brother's life, and now he leaves him here in Trojan soil. Oh, how I wish the earth would swallow me." So Agamemnon is feeling grief. He's feeling distraught. But why? Is it because he loves his brother and he's going to miss the companionship of his brother? No, listen to the words again. For how shall I return to thirsty Argos and face the shame of losing you this way? So the whole thing is actually about Agamemnon. The whole thing, like his brother is shot and he's saying, "Oh no, what are people going to think about me? What are people going to think of, my men are going to think less of me. We failed to get Helen back. We failed to conquer the Trojans. We're going to sail home in misery. And then a Trojan in the future is going to be like, he, we defeated the great Agamemnon." That's what Agamemnon's feeling. That's what think about that for a second. Think about your Menelaus. And you're seeing that. That is very important. And we're going to dig into this idea of how Agamemnon and other characters feel at this loss. but I want to point out the social feeling here. So the feeling is not a personal feeling. It is a social shame. It is what other people are going to think about Agamemnon. That's what's happening here. That is what Agamemnon is worried about. Your Greek word of the day is shame. The Greek word is Aidos. Aidos. It can be Aidos. There's different pronunciations, but Aidos. And this is shame, but it's a social shame. The feeling of being dishonored in front of others, or the respectful restraint that keeps you from acting dishonorably. But it is a focus on others. It's how other people see you. That's so critical to the understanding of this, because when we get to Achilles and we see what really drives him, and we've already seen this, Achilles has specifically abandoned the social system of shame, honor, and glory. In other words, of what other people say. He has specifically said no to that, and he is living by his own internal principled way of valuing and what he wants. And Homer stresses this. And I will tell you, I've taken many courses and read many books on this. This is not emphasized enough in the reading of the Homeric works and all of Greece, that it's the personal desire of Achilles that makes him eventually see the social economic system of shame and glory of what people say about you, which leads them to give you goodies when you conquer a town. And it's based on your actions that you're out there fighting in the front. You're getting the most danger. You're killing the most people. You're the most likely to die because you're at the front. That gives what other people tell you. So Achilles abandons this because he figures out that it's all arbitrary, because Agamemnon takes away his prize just like that, arbitrarily. And Achilles is like, what? This is such a ridiculous system. He quits. This right here, this shame, Aidos, is a clear example of what drives all of the Greek warriors for the most part in varying degrees. But Agamemnon is the arc example of the man who lives in terms of honor, dishonor, and what other people say of him. The brilliance of Homer is that he brings this truth out by showing his brother dying. So we have to remember, it's true that Menelaus is not going to die here. But the way that Homer does this is, at first, he thinks he's going to die, and he's acting as though he's going to die, and he laments his death. He grieves over his death, and then he acts in this way by thinking about his own personal shame rather than the death of his quote-unquote beloved brother. So we don't see a real love there. It's not really about his personal love for his brother. So Menelaus, after he hears this, says this: "Have courage now and do not fear for me. The arrow did not strike a vital spot, for my bright belt and armor blocked the blow, the work of craftsmen forged with care and skill." So, but basically, he says to Agamemnon, don't worry about it. I'm fine. None of that's going to happen. And they call for a healer, and then Menelaus is taken off to the side to be healed by a healer named Machaon. But the point is that Menelaus basically has to calm Agamemnon down, not about his love for him, but about, don't worry, you're not going to be dishonored because I'm not going to die. And have courage, he says. Okay, so in this next section, Agamemnon goes throughout the ranks and rallies the Greeks. He either praises them who are preparing to be on the front lines, or he criticizes people he perceives to be in the back. So again, Agamemnon is the chief of the arbiter of this shame, glory, honor culture. And he shames you if he thinks some things. He honors you if he thinks other things. And that's part of it, is he's arbitrating this. He's going around telling you things. So he'll say, "Grecians, let your courage never fail, for Zeus will not support the ones who break their sacred oaths. The vultures soon will feast on Trojan flesh, and we will take their wives and children home when Troy belongs to us." So here's a particular shame that Agamemnon brings to Odysseus and Menestheus. He says, "Why do you hold back and watch from afar? You both should be among the frontmost ranks, ready to face the brunt of this great war. You love to feast and drink fine wine with me when I prepare a banquet for the Greeks, but now you'd watch as others fight and die, though you should be among the first to fight. So notice the relationship amongst feasting, having the best of foods, being the first of men to get the food, and then also being the first of men to fight. So this is the economics of it. If you're first to fight, you're the best fighter, you put yourself in the most risk, you get the best goods, you get the best food, the best wine, the best women. They're all given to you in that sense. Now, Odysseus, in this case, is very firm with Agamemnon. It says, "What words have slipped between your teeth, great king, son of Atreus? How could you say this? That I would shrink from war when Greeks and Trojans clash with fierce Ares' strength. If you desire, come close and watch me stand amidst the front with all the mighty Greeks. No idle words from me will you hear now or evermore." Great speech out of the mouth of the man of words, Odysseus. So Odysseus is a man of words, but action and words are intimately integrated in Greek thought and ideology. It's not just about words. That can be something that can be praised, but words without action is irrelevant. Action, action, action. Even the man of words is a man of action. There's another thing that he adds here when he talks to Diomedes. So here he says to Diomedes, "Known for all your skill, why linger here just watching from afar? Your father never acted so in war. He stood ahead of all, eager to fight, brave even when alone. I've often heard of his bold deeds, though I never saw them. Once, so I'm told, he journeyed to Mycenae as guest of Polynices, who sought allies to wage the war against great Thebes. He marched then with his men to sacred Thebes and begged our people for strong fighting men. We were inclined to grant the help he asked, but Zeus sent omens, turning them away. So Tydeus journeyed back, and on his way he found the Cadmeans feasting in their halls. The one alone he challenged every man, and won each contest of their strength and skill, aided by bright-eyed Athena's might." So he goes on, and at the end Agamemnon says, "Such was the man your father was in war. But you, his son, are far beneath his might." So this is, again, is that shame, honor culture, the economics of it, and he's trying to inspire him or motivate him to act based on, well, your father was a great warrior. He was always on the front. He was the strongest. Are you as strong as your father? I don't think so. And then Diomedes is now going to have to prove, so there's a proof necessary. Now, you might see this kind of behavior in men today, this idea of having to prove yourself through your actions, through your strength, through your heroism. Now, I'm not trying to denigrate that, but I am pointing out something really important, that this is all about what other people say about you. It's how other people view you. So it's all focused on the thoughts and ideas of other people. That's the Greek Agamemnon culture, and that's the culture that Achilles has shrugged from, has quit, has absconded from, has said, no, 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 I'm done. Now the next section, the Clash of Armies. So here we have another analogy, another simile, comparing the quietness of the Greeks and the loudness of the Trojans. Now, it's not the pygmies and the cranes like it was in the last chapter. Now it is the waves and the noisy flocks of bleating sheep within a farmer's fold. Here's some lines. "As when a wave stirred up by western winds begins to rise far off upon the sea and crashes on the shore with deafening roar, cresting high and casting foam about, so too did the Greeks advance without a sound, moving to war at each commander's words, their armor flashing as they marched in ranks." So they're very natural, but they're a very dangerous force, waves, I think. And there's a kind of consistency of their action. To me, it sounds like they're very regimented, like they're much more organized and ready to go. And that makes them a deadlier force. But the Trojans were as noisy as a flock of bleating sheep within a farmer's fold. Their many tongues, a mix of foreign sounds, for they were men from far and distant lands. And Ares spurred them on to meet the Greeks, while Athena, goddess of the shining eyes, encouraged the Greeks with all her might. Fear and terror, too, joined in the fight, and strife, whose hatred knows no bounds at all. And it continues. The point is that you get all these great imageries of the two armies about to clash. And you have a reference about the Trojans, that one of the problems with them from the Greek perspective. Now, whether this is actually a problem is not the point today. From the Greeks, from the Homer's perspective, it's the fact that they're not unified. They're not integrated. So it's all these foreign voices, which the Trojans, what was happening was all the allies throughout that whole region were coming to the defense of Troy, but they spoke different languages. And it was like this bleating sound. In fact, here's a historical instance about words. The reason we call barbarians today, the word barbarian, that comes from the Greeks hearing foreign Eastern sounds that they were sound, and it sounded like they were saying bar, 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 bar. So they called them the barbarians. And a lot of associations happens, a lot of negative associations, which I think are not appropriate. Nevertheless, that's where it comes from. And it's an interesting thing to think about the etymology of these words. But it comes from this kind of, Greek hearing these Asian words, these Near Eastern, Asian, Middle Eastern words. And I don't know what any of that means. And it sounds like bar, 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 bar. And that's where it comes from. In this section, we have the beginnings of death of humans. So humans are starting to really die here. We're going to dig into this as we go, but I want to read one in particular and show you a kind of pattern that happens here. A Greek soldier kills a Trojan soldier by throwing a spear. It pierced his forehead, sank into the bone, and darkness veiled his eyes. He fell like stone. It's very vivid, very horrific language. And that's light, by the way. It gets way more intense. As he collapsed, Alphenor rushes forth to grab the fallen body by the feet to strip the armor. So you have a Greek trying to get this Trojan's armor. When he does that, a Trojan comes. When he goes to grab the body, a Trojan comes and stabs him and kills Alphenor. And then around the body of Alphenor, there's a battle that rages as Greek and Trojans fought like hungry wolves, each man on man in fierce and deadly fight. Then Ajax the Greater hurled his mighty spear. It struck Simoeisius, a young man, who once was born near Simoeisius' riverbank. His mother bore him as she came down from the hills to tend her sheep by water's edge. But now his brief life ended in the war, his body crushed beneath great Ajax's spear. The spear struck deep beside his chest, his heart, and passed right through his shoulder as he fell, like some tall poplar tree beside the stream, cut down by woodsmen for the chariot's yoke. The tree lies there, unused beside the flow. So too young Simoeisius met his end. So there's a whole system of death being explained here. And you'll see this often. Sometimes it's longer, sometimes it's shorter. Sometimes you'll get a whole life very quickly. Sometimes you won't get anything but this person died and he was Trojan or something. But you get lots of death in this book. And this is a good example of what death looks like from a poetic standpoint. So notice a couple things. You have these hungry wolves. So you have an animalistic explanation of the two sides attacking over this already dead body because they're trying to strip the armor. Whoever strips the armor gets the honor of it. Remember, this is the economics. In the midst of this, Ajax the Greater throws a spear and it kills Simoeisius. Now it doesn't do it in some quick fashion where Simoeisius is killed. The first thing that happens is the spear is hurled and there's an indication that it struck Simoeisius, but then there's a description of his life, birth, and his death. So he's a young man who was born near Simoeisius' riverbanks. This is why he was named Simoeisius, because he was born by the riverbanks. His mother bore him there as she came down from the hills. So there's a description of his birth, right? To tend her sheep by water's edge. So you get a picture of the rural life that they lived. But now his brief life ended in the war. The spear that had struck beside his chest. So now there's a vivid description. It's piercing his heart, passing through his shoulder as he fell like some tall poplar tree by the stream. So you get this whole thing of this nature look at this war, that humans are not actually drawn as some foreign entities in the natural universe. That everything about the birth, life, and death of Simoeisius is brought into relationship to poplars being cut down and falling by a river, of the moving of sheep by a mother who gives birth by the river to a young man who's going to go off to war, fight and die, just like that poplar. You can even see the spear, which is designed by the poplar, which goes and spears and kills Simoeisius. There's a symmetry to everything. It's all integrated into one image, and it's not just some brutal death scene. That's what's important here. It's not just some killing him in some horrific way, and there's all kinds of horrific deaths here. It's about the totality and the meaning of the life of Simoeisius and what brings it meaning. Now, the last section is heroes fall, where we get more of these grand Trojan and Greek heroes are starting to fall. We have Pandaros, we have Aidos, we have multiple people on both sides. We're not going to go through all the names. You don't even need to know most of the names. It's not really important. But the point is that now you're having the battle beginning without Achilles. So the war is restarting, and it's starting without the greatest Greek soldier, which is Achilles. So this is going to be a challenge for the Greeks, right? And we also know that Zeus is not actually on the side of the Greeks right now. He wants the Trojans to win and to push the Greeks back so that they can learn the value of their greatest soldier, Achilles. Okay, so thank you for joining me this time. Make sure to check out the other videos if this is your first video watching. I'm going through the whole series. Also, you could support what I'm doing by buying the book, going to troubadour.studio/Iliad, and the royalties to this allows me to do an Odyssey translation, do Greek play translations, and do other translations designed specifically for first-timers. So thank you so much, and I'll see you next time.